Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the significance of this bill, if you look at it, is not really about electric skateboards, but about the possibility of an entirely new motorized vehicle category. This puts these types of vehicle transports on par with bicycles and allows them on our roads. The next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see this technology really bloom. California is a center for innovation for these types of transportation options. This is an important bill really for the future of transportation in California, and I respectfully request your aye vote.
Seeing no additional, I'm sorry. Mr. Bro.
Mr. Speaker, members, I rise in support of AB 604. I had the opportunity to test drive one of these electric skateboards here in Sacramento, and I would urge you, when we adjourn today, to go home to your local electric surfboard store and test drive one down to a convenience store and purchase a Chia Pet. Chia.
Thank you, Mr. Bro. Seeing no additional comment, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 64, noes 1. Senate amendments are concurred in. Moving to AB 679 by Mr. Allen. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 679 by Assembly Member Travis Allen, an action relating to controlled substances, declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Mr. Allen, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 2013, we established a requirement for all prescribers and dispensers of controlled substances to apply to the Cures database by January 1st, 2016, so that they could access the information in the system to help reduce prescription drug abuse and diversion. The original estimate for the streamlined process to be rolled out was summer 2015, but the new application process has yet to be placed into full effect. So the DOJ will be releasing the new process soon, but this is our last chance before the mandated enrollment deadline. To avoid confusion and to encourage licensee onboarding with Cures as it gets upgraded, AB 679 provides a modest 6-month extension to the enrollment deadline.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Ms. Grove, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I respectfully rise in opposition of this bill. I've received numerous phone calls from my constituency group regarding this specific bill, and specifically one very, very vocal person, Carrie Oakey, is very, very disappointed that this bill is going to the floor, and I ask for a no vote.
Seeing no additional discussion or debate, Clerk, I'm sorry, Mr. Gallagher. Members, if you'd like to be recognized, please put your microphones up. Mr. Gallagher, you are recognized.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, members, this just in, I got a note here from my staff that Ms. Sue Flay had called in as well and was opposed to this bill. I think there's some real concerns here. We should go back and look at this before we just rush this thing. And this was a wharf, right? I mean, has there been any, maybe question to the author, why is this coming to us last minute
without
I haven't even had a chance to really read this bill.
Without objection, Mr. Gallagher, without objection.
Could you please maybe speak to that? Thank you.
I appreciate it very much, and I will answer the question directly. I actually, too, received a call from a constituent in the member from Bakersfield's district. This was a Mr. Dwayne Pipe, and he said that this is quite urgent, and it really would be important that we delay this for 6 months. Furthermore, I believe, Mr. Gallagher, there was someone from your district. I only caught his last name, which was Freely, but he also mentioned the need for this bill.
Speaker.
You may proceed, Mr. Gallagher.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, I think this bill is worthy of support, and as the assistant floor leader, I encourage our whips to whip this bill and whip it good.
All debate having ceased, Mr. Allen, you may close.
Thank you very much, and I would encourage your hey, ho, vote aye for this bill.
The clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 70, noes 0 on the urgency. Ayes 70, noes 0 on the measure. Senate amendments are concurred in. Mr. Hadley, for what purpose do you rise?
Under motions and resolutions.
Mr. Hadley, you may proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend Assembly Rule 96 so that SB 799 by Senator Hill may be withdrawn from the Rules Committee to the Assembly floor without prior Rules Committee approval.
Mr. Holden, for what purpose do you rise?
Democratic caucus.
Mr. Holden is calling for a Democratic caucus. The Assembly will take a brief recess. Democratic caucus in the lounge. Members, please come to the floor. All members, please report to the floor. Members, we are back in session. We did have a motion before us It was a motion by Mr. Hadley, and I believe it was seconded by Mr. Gallagher on a suspension of the rules. Members, this requires 41 votes. It's not debatable. Mr. Holden is asking for a no vote, and Mr. Hadley is asking for an aye vote. Clerk will open the roll. Mr. Holden is asking for a no vote. Mr. Hadley is asking for an aye vote. Members, this is procedural. Requires 41 votes. Mr. Holden is asking for a no vote. The clerk will close the roll. Ayes 28, noes 51. Motion to suspend the rules fails. Mr. Holden, you are recognized for your procedural motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is a committee report at the desk relative to AB 1250 Bloom. I request unanimous consent that the committee report be deemed read and deemed adopted, and to suspend Assembly Rule 63 to allow AB 1250 to be taken up without reference to file for purposes of concurring in Senate amendments.
Is there any objection to this request? Seeing and hearing no objection, the committee report is deemed read and deemed adopted, and the request is granted. I am rescinding the action whereby the following rules were referred to committee pursuant to Assembly Rule 77.2, and I'm returning them to the third reading file. AB 864 Williams from the Natural Resources Committee, AB 361 Ashajian, and AB 693 Eggman from the Utilities and Commerce Committee. Mr. Holden, you are recognized for your motion.
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 63 to allow the following bills to be taken up today without reference to file for purposes of concurring in Senate amendments. AB 361 Ashajian.
Thank you, Mr. Holden. The clerk will note we are, members, going to AB 1250. I'm sorry. Members, AB 1250 by Mr. Bloom, without reference to file. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1250 by Assemblymember Bloom, an action relating to vehicles.
Mr. Bloom, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our law is out of date in the way that it sets limits on the allowable weight of a public transit bus. I've had calls from even a constituent named Bob Katz, in fact, on this. The decade-old law that we have conflicts with some of our, more modern goals and laws, some of you are paying attention, that also affect how a transit bus is built. Simply put, buses weigh more than the current law allows because of modern innovation and fixtures like LNG tanks, bike racks, and access equipment for the disabled. Without a compromise, certain transit buses, when doing their job of carrying lots of passengers, could become illegal on January 1st, 2016. So we need a solution. AB 1250 provides relief from these unintentionally conflicting policy and regulatory objectives by instituting a more realistic and statutorily enforceable schedule of new bus weights while decreasing over time the allowable weight for transit buses, thus driving bus suppliers and public transit operators to design, manufacture, and ultimately put into operation increasingly lighter transit buses. This bill ultimately reduces the impact on highways and local roads from public transportation service compared to today's bus fleet. Therefore, I and Bob Katz urge your aye vote.
Ms. Waldron, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker, we don't have our analysis yet. I'd ask a few minutes so we could have that.
Okay. Ms. Waldron, let me check on that. Okay. Ms. Waldron, we believe that the sergeants are distributing the wharf sheet. As we speak, we will pause to ensure all members have that information in front of them. Members, we are going to pass temporarily to ensure that that information is distributed to all members. Okay, members, we're going to pass temporarily on AB 1250, Bloom. We are moving to AB 361 without reference to file. AB 361, clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 361 by Assemblymember Ashajian, an act relating to electricity, declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Mr. Ashajian, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to present Assembly Bill 361, which has been amended to include a requirement that the California Public Utilities Commission, CPUC, continue to convene an independent peer review panel to conduct an independent review of enhanced seismic studies of the nuclear power plant until August 26, 2025. The independent peer reviews panel's contract with the CPUC is set to expire on November 30, 2015. Even though it has not completed its review of the studies and findings of Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. The amendments will ensure there is no break in the review process by the panel. Urgency is needed to provide public assurance of emergency planning and independent review. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ashajian. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 68, no 0 on the urgency. Ayes 68, no 0 on the bill. Measure passes. Senate amendments are concurred in. Members, we are going to resume. We're going to resume AB 1250. Mr. Bloom, all debate having ceased on that item, AB 1250, you may close.
Thank you. I ask for your aye vote.
With that, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 75, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. We are moving to file item number 28. This is AB 693 by Ms. Eggman. Dr. Eggman, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 693 by Assemblymember Eggman and others, and Act relating to energy.
Dr. Eggman, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I present AB 693, which will establish low-income tenants of affordable housing the ability to benefit from solar systems. Unlike past programs, this will bring overdue direct economic benefits to low-income Californians. For too long, districts like mine and many of yours have waited to be part of California's green economy. We think this bill does it. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Dr. Eggman. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 46, noes 25. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 33. This is AB 864. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 864 by Assemblymember Williams and others, and Act relating to oil spill response.
Ms. Burke, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. On behalf of my colleague from Santa Barbara, I would like to present AB 864. AB 864 requires intrastate pipelines in environmentally sensitive areas along the coast to use the best available technology, including but not limited to a system of leak detection technology, automatic shutoff valves, or remote-controlled sectionalized block valves to reduce the amount of oil released in an oil spill in order to protect state waters and wildlife. AB 864 sets higher standards of protection for thousands of miles of intrastate pipeline along our coast. The bill will require the state fire marshal to determine the best available technology standard and to assess the pipeline operator's risk analysis to ensure intrastate pipelines provide protection to our coastal areas and wildlife. Senate amendments were clarifying and narrowed the bill to focus on intrastate pipelines. The amendments removed interstate pipelines. They also changed the definition of best achievable technology to best available technology so that operators can feasibly purchase and apply technology to pipelines. I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Burke. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 61, noes 10. Senate amendments are concurred in. We are moving to AB 684 by Mr. Alejo without reference to file. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 684 by Assemblymember Alejo, and Act relating to healing arts.
Mr. Alejo, you may open.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 684 is a product of extensive negotiation between members of the Assembly, the Senate, the Governor's Office, state boards, Assembly, BNP, and a very large and ever-growing group of stakeholders. I'm very proud of all the legislative and administrative staff who have spent an incredible amount of time working towards what I would call a suitable and adequate compromise. I especially want to thank BNP consultant Leandra and my staff Tyler and Horacio, who worked especially hard to make this happen, and my joint author, the chair of Assembly BNP, who was a true partner in accomplishing this bill. As negotiated, AB 684 will allow for the establishment of landlord-tenant relationship between a registered dispensing optician, an optometrist, and an optical company with certain limitations. The bill provides for ample protection for optometrists and will allow for a meaningful transition period for optometrists who are currently working for a non-compliant business model. Finally, the bill would boost enforcement provisions in code so that the state regulatory entities can adequately protect consumers against businesses operating outside of the law. Again, this is a product of months of negotiations and years of controversy. The bill now shares the support of the past opposition, including the California Optometric Association and the Consumer Attorneys of California. Members, we all came here to help solve our state's problems, to negotiate and find compromise, make tough decisions, and take issues head on and not kick them down the road. But this is a dispute that had lasted for nearly 2 decades, 20 years, and we've finally been able to reach a permanent solution. The state Senate voted unanimously for this compromise. I respectfully ask for your vote on this important measure.
Thank you, Mr. Alejo. Ms. Bonilla, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, and I, too, of course, rise in support of 684. At the root of this bill is an issue that is called the bar on the corporate practice of medicine. We've been wrestling with this on several different issues throughout this legislative season. And in California, we currently have the practice that we don't think that corporations or companies or even hospitals should be in the business of hiring medical professionals like doctors, like optometrists, in order to practice their medicine. And this is a very important principle because it was at the root of this bill. We had some optometric companies that were employing optometrists, and there was a concern that there was maybe influence on their practice of medicine. And one thing that this bill is accomplishing is making sure that there will be a transition to a different model. Now they will either not be employed by that company, or they will lease the space, and they will no longer be under any even illusion or a sense that maybe perhaps they are giving their medical treatment with any confusion as to where their paycheck comes from and what their patient needs. It's a very important patient protection that we're doing when we are voting on this bill. But it's also an issue, I think, that we know for consumer protection, for good medical treatment. We are upholding that with this bill. It is an incredible compromise, and we are achieving something very, very significant, making sure we keep access for Californians so they can easily go get their optometric needs met, but making sure that that is going to be from a medical professional who has no other influence other than the medical care of that patient. I ask you to vote aye.
Thank you, Ms. Bonilla. Seeing no additional discussion or debate on the item, Mr. Alejo, you may close if you wish.
Take that as my close.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 70, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in.